there. And we also have Hillary, our program coordinator at BPMA, and thank you, Hillary, for helping us organize and bringing it to a point now where we are together
Yeah,
and
of course.
going through this
Hi,
event.
everyone. Thanks for joining us. And thanks, Gaurav.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Sudhir, for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here. My goal with the session today, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, so hopefully you're able to see it momentarily. Are you able? I hope you're able to see the screen now. My exceptional interview outcomes. So my goal with the session today is to make it this profoundly impactful for you. Part of it is there is a lot of compelling content, I believe, I'm going to present. But I want to I want to mention something. Uh, so what I'm going to share with you is a process, is a framework through which you can look at your interviews and you can have, which I believe, exceptional outcomes. But this is work, and this requires certain degree of reorganizing information. It requires a certain way of thinking about the interviews as you go and approach them. So it is not a magic potion. It will require some work, but if you do that, I think your outcomes will improve. So um, what I would love to do is, as you have questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. As we come through it, I'll try to answer them as they come in. But at the end, it'll be good to answer any questions that you might have. I'll be happy to do that. So, with that, I would like to start with something. Okay, let's do this here. So, the goal of our session, in my mind, is that you are here and we want to get there. Whatever here is, the here might be that you are a product manager who is trying to, who's trying to do a lateral move to another company. It could be you're a product executive, you're a VP of product, or someone, chief product officer, whatever the case is, and you're thinking about a lateral move. It could be you are new to product management and you're trying to get in and you're trying to see, how can you make your mark in this area. So wherever you are here, if you have a vision of how you want to get there, my goal is that we facilitate that piece together with you, right? So with this, let me quickly talk about the agenda for our day, what we're going to cover in this hour. So very quickly, I'll introduce myself, where I am and all of that. I want to share with you the process and a framework immediately after that. Um, and then, as I share this process and a framework, we would look at a very high level. We'll switch gears a little bit. And the reason I want to switch the gears a little bit, because we want to make it extremely visceral and very real. So we'll change the gears and we'll talk about what exactly is the hiring process for product management professionals. I'm, saying product manager, but it could be, if you think about it, it could be a product director, it could product executive, or a person who's an aspirant in product management field, right? Um, as we think about this process, I will also share with you very quickly a day in the life of, right? So we'll chat about what does a day in the life of product manager looks like. It is important to think about this because these are the core things a product manager would deliver, for example. And when we frame our answers, when we talk to our interviewers, we will frame our answers in a way that it is very clear that we understand what this job entails, very specific to the company we're working with, and why we are going to be a great fit for this specific role. I'll do a sort of an exercise. What I've done is I have taken a LinkedIn job posting. I randomly picked up something. There was for Calendly. It picked up, showed up in my feed, and I have taken that job description, and then we'll reframe. We'll take it. We'll bucketize certain things. We'll reframe some things, and then we'll start answering questions like, when you get into an interview, people come in and they'll ask question, tell me about yourself. How do you go about and start with that question? So we'll do that. And of course, questions are welcome throughout. So with that, very quickly about me. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the East Bay to be very more precise. I lived in Boston for a long time, close to Boston for a long time, for about 10 years. I have I've been working in a in the cybersecurity space for the last 5 years. Before that, I have worked in marketing technology, and in the current role that I have, my focus has been customer success. But I was up until recently, I was part of the product organization. I product reported to our chief product officer here, and in addition to some of the industries, which is cybersecurity, martech, which is marketing technology, big data, legal and compliance, telecom. I did a couple of startups on my own as well. I've helped some folks secure jobs at different places like Amazon and Oracle, and that is on one side. Also with startups, right? So one end of the spectrum, these large technology companies, the other ones, smaller tech companies. But on the completely different axis, also folks who were, for example, working for non-governmental organizations, World Health Organization, things like that, medical school students and stuff like that. So the reason I'm bringing this up is just because if you think about it, is there for an interview process, there must be a commonality, irrespective of where you go for an interview and job. My hope with this session is that we can bubble up what is common, irrespective of field. We'll keep it very focused on product, but some of the principles here are applicable for anything essentially what we do in terms of job interviews. So with that, let me make a quick transition to three principles, which I think are super critical, very important for us when we think about approaching a job interview, right? So, and these principles will differentiate you over a majority of the candidates that the companies are going to talk to. And I say that also, I've been very fortunate to have hired, I would say probably tens, and the number is probably approaching 100 by now. I've hired a lot of people and have also interviewed at a lot of places myself. So the three principles that I want to bring up for you is first principle is it is about them. It is not about us. Yes, we know internally it is about us. We are looking for the new role because we are not happy in our current role. Maybe we are very happy. We are looking for that uptick in our position. We are looking at uptick in our compensation. Yes, those things are there. But end of the day, it is about them as we approach the interview process. Anyone who is going to hire you is going to hire you because they have a certain problem, they have a certain objective, certain outcomes in mind that they want to accomplish through you. So we have to, when we think about answering some of the interview questions, let's keep that frame in mind. It is about them. The second principle I want to actually bring up, and it is super important as it relates to the product management professionals, we need to be solutions focused, right? So being solution focused, what it really means is when someone essentially hires us, they want us to solve a problem. They want us to come in and capitalize on certain opportunities that they have not been able to capitalize. They want us to accelerate some things, right? So when we think about the areas which is the problem space, solution space, and all of and that part of it. So understanding problems is very, very important, and understanding the right problems, addressing the right problems is important. But end of the day, the solutions we are going to craft for the team are going to be very, very important, which means also in our when we interact with our stakeholders on the other side, people who are interviewing us, uh, we remain solution focused. We don't get bogged down when in some things where we may have certain baggage in the past and things like that. So remain solution focused. But last and but not the least, probably the most important principle is about delivering value in every interaction. Now, today, we wouldn't have a lot of time to go through every piece in it, so we will, we'll cover a part of it. But here's what I think can give you a huge edge when you go into the interviews, right? So you have an interview process that you're going to go for the interview. A lot of times, what most candidates are going to do, you go to the interview. First thing you do is the first time you're going to meet with the person in the interview is the time when they show up. This is the time, or that time you show up and you have the interaction. Uh, but think about what if you can interact with them ahead of time? It's like before the interview, send them an email, and it's like, hey, I'm really looking forward to our conversations. I'm very curious as we go through and discuss, what are the top challenges, so we can actually work through it. The Once the interview is over, a lot of people will go in and send out thank you emails, right? Which is good, and I get them all the time. But a lot of the times, you can also tell they are templated. It was a pleasure to meet you. I'm looking forward to the next steps, and that is good. Nothing wrong with it. I think it is better than not doing anything. But what if you had a conversation? Now, being succinct is important here, but you had a conversation. It's like I was really intrigued by our discussion, and based on that, what I have done is I have essentially we talked about how do you go about hiring people. And here is, you sometimes a person may ask you a question. Well, when you hire product managers, do you look for technical skill sets, or you look for, program management skill sets, right? And you may come back to them, and it's like, I feel like there's a false dichotomy when about the hiring practices, and here is something that I've thought about, and point them to an article or something like that, right? So now you've created some value in a sense, or you could have something that you've written up, and once you start doing some of these things, you create some of these collateral for yourself. What you're going to see is you can start reusing them. So creating value in every interaction is very important. And if I look at 2 and 3, I'm going to combine these two. And one of the things is, when you get into the interview, sometimes what happens is you have a dynamic. What the dynamic is, the person asks you a question, you answer the question. They ask another question, you answer it again, another question. So this ping pong, the game of ping pong continues. And I find that dynamic very interesting, but not super effective. There are candidates, what they will do, and I would urge all of us to do, is instead of having this ping pong, think about, they are trying to accomplish some outcomes, right? They want you to come in and do certain things. So very quickly help them pivot to a place where you are together. You're not sitting across the table in a, I don't mean in a literal sense, but what I mean is that you go on the other side of the table and you're looking at the problem together, and you're attacking the problem and thinking about the solutions, and you're brainstorming on those things. When you do that, and if you can create that collaboration during your interview, now you have actually come to a place where you have a huge leg up over other candidates, and the person as you work with, they can see how you will be a partner in solving those problems. So those are the three principles to think about. It's about them: remain solution focused and create value in every interaction. Now, with that, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what we're going to do in our session here, the process for the session. So, from a session perspective, what we're going to do here is we're going to do three things. Three things. It may seem a little complicated because the first time you do it, it seems a little complicated. Once you do it 2 or 3 times, it becomes sort of second nature. Um, and first thing we're going to do is we're going to bucketize. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a job description. And as I mentioned, I randomly picked up a job description. It was from Calendly, and Calendly, I use the tool. Anyhow, so they were looking for a product manager enterprise. So we look at their job description. We're going to rearrange the job description in a way which makes sense for us to answer some questions. Then we will reframe our replies, and we'll state certain things in our own words, and then we rehearse, and you do the practice and the delivery. We're not going to be able to do the rehearsal from practice delivery standpoint, but I'll give you some very high level, how you can approach, for example, a question. Tell me about yourself. All right, so with that, I'm going to give you, so these are the three things we're going to do, and we're going to do that through a framework. So very quickly, let me give you a very high level framework, and then I'm actually going to switch my screen a little bit to a tool where I'll show you how I go about populating them. So this is a framework. I architected this framework some time back, and I have been able to leverage. I've been able to help several people with this specific framework, and I've seen that when people use it, we use it well. What we really get, the outcomes are really exceptional from an interview process. So the first thing on the framework you're going to see here is core functions, recent accomplishments. What we're trying to do here is we are looking at what, if you're hired for this role, what are the core functions they expect you to do, right? And we also want to see that how those core functions that they expect you to do align with some of the recent accomplishments that you've had, right? So there is a tie-in here. The second thing on the framework is about the stakeholders. Product management as a function is probably one of the roles which is it is at the intersection of so many things. On one side, you have got engineering. On the other side, you've got sales. On the other side, you've got marketing. You've got people from customer success and all the other functions. So it is one of the most cross-functional roles, and you're talking to the customers as well. So with this, there are going to be stakeholders that you're going to work with. And if you think about a relationship between a product manager, and by the way, I use product manager, but it could be product executive. So the relationship between a product manager and on the other side, for example, salesperson, there is a certain set of expectations that come along with that. And we can say there's a kind of an informal contract. So we want to think about, what these relationships are. Why this becomes important? It becomes important when we are going to go and talk to some of the folks For example, in my interview process, I might be talking to a salesperson. It's not usual, but if I'm talking to a salesperson, I would want to think about what this interface looks like, and I might have to adapt some of my answers compared to when I'm talking to, for example, a finance person, right? So it's important to understand who the stakeholders are, what you do. The second thing I want to bring up here is the opportunities and challenges. This is actually a fascinating piece. It is fascinating because here you got to apply some of your thinking. You imagine what are the opportunities and challenges. You can do that by looking at the job description, majority of the time, what people have published in this organization, and we'll reframe those as questions. So we'll put them as questions. When people come in at the end of the interview, it's like, do you have questions for me? Or along the way, it doesn't have to be, all the way to the end, or along the way, you come in and it's like, I am really curious about this. So we'll look at it how it comes into play. And the last piece is, look, I mean, as we come in, the moment you arrive for the interview, the person on the other side has a question at the back of the mind. They may not explicitly ask that question, but the question is, what can you do for me, right? What can you take? I have this pain. Can you take this away? We have this opportunity. I have no time to deal with it. Could you help me do this? Whatever it is. So we need to be in a place where we can talk about the results we can deliver, our value proposition, what we have, and then the question after that is typically, um, do I really believe them, right? So the believability piece of it is where you have a narrative, and if you have a narrative, and by the way, I write here stories. I don't mean you make up stories, and I'm not implying that. What I'm really saying is that you string together what you have done and put that into a compelling narrative that it makes sense and becomes visceral for the people who are actually listening to what you just said, right? So that's a quick framework, so there are, if you think about three columns here, what are the core functions that are required for this job? What are the recent accomplishments as they tie in? Who are the stakeholders that we are going to work with? What are the opportunities and challenges as you perceive, and that will become questions? What are the results and value proposition you bring to the table? And after that, we'll talk about and creating a narrative for some of the things. So with that, I want to switch towards very quickly towards switch gears again, and we want to look at what does the hiring process for a product manager or a product executive looks like. So give me 1 second to go ahead and share that screen with you. Uh, so it'll come up here in a moment. Okay, so this process may be quite different for person to person, right? So, but from company to company. But let's have a quick look at what we have got here. So, when we look at the product hiring process, you would see probably something like this. You will see, you will have a recruiter screening. After the recruiter screening is done, you may have phone/Zoom screenings. Maybe the hiring manager or someone does the next round. It is not uncommon about someone coming in and in these product interviews to give you a home exercise. It would be about, tell me, how do you design this? How would you improve this? And things like that. So I feel this could be a session by its own, which is thinking about how do you do these exercises? How would you estimate this? I want to see, how would you lay a cable across the whole United States? Things like that, depending on which kind of companies you go to, but you may have a homework exercise. And then you will have a core round. It may be on site, it may not be on site, it may be over Zoom or something. But in the core round, you could probably expect to talk to other product managers. You could be to the hiring manager. You would most likely talk to the engineering/R&D/dev team, right? You would most likely talk to the skip level manager, right? And once you are done with this, and if everything works out, you go to the offer, background check, and first day at work, right? So that's kind of a typical process. Your process may be a little bit different depending on company to company. The reason I want to bring it in is that as we go through along with this, I would recommend as soon as you get to this stage, that you go ahead and complete and prepare your visual canvas already, because along the way, it will help you with every step of the way as you go through the interview process. Now, I want to, as we think about this, I mentioned, making sure that we are delivering value, and the way we deliver values, the question is, how do product managers deliver value in their organization? What do they do on a day-to-day basis? So I'm going to bring this up. There's quite a bit going here. This is a PM's Life, and let me make this a little smaller so you can see it first. So A PM is, and I'll make it a little bit bigger in just a moment. A PM is probably going to be driven by the core mission, whatever the core mission is. The core mission, maybe, they are trying to, you've been tasked with coming up with generate a net $5 million revenue, annual recurring revenue through a product line that you have been tasked to build, right? So that could be the core mission you're driven by. It could be to reduce the churn. It could be to improve customer experience. Whatever the case is, they are driven by certain set of core missions. It's important to understand. Now, when we think about the work, and I look at a product manager's work and or product executive's work, you can put that into 4 buckets. The first bucket, I would say, is vision, strategy, and research. And within strategy and research, you're doing things like market and demand sizing, competitive analysis, customer prospect demands, where customer is saying, I need this, prospect says, I need this, those kind of things, balancing those, time horizon planning, feature function trade-offs, things like that, right? And eventually, as you think about vision, strategy, and roadmap, your end deliverables become things like go forward, outline, high-level roadmap, things like that, right? So that's one set of work you do. It is important, but because what we're going to do is when we look at the job description, we're going to take the job description, put them into these buckets, right? So we'll take this into the first bucket, what belongs here. The second thing, when you're thinking about as a product manager's core function, is the design. Here you need to be creative. You're thinking, you're dealing with, how do we organize something? You're dealing with workflow. How do the pieces work together? I'm going to design a new customer experience. What happens one after the next? It could be the presentation, which is user experience part of it. It could be feature function trade-offs here now from the standpoint of the user experience standpoint. And typically what you would have here is as a key outcome from the stage is prototyping. It is quite common to talk about design thinking, lean skills, rapid prototyping, things like that, right? So as you're thinking the interview process, understanding some of this should help. The next piece, so we have done the vision strategy, this whole piece around vision strategy research, you've done the design piece of it, but now is the time, the proof is in the pudding, the execution time. So here we are thinking about, now we've got a high level roadmap, we have a prototype, now we're thinking about feasibility and prioritization. At any given time with most organizations, their requests are, they're going to be a million requests, and you can only do this with the amount of resources you have available. So you have to think about, how you're going to go about what's feasible, what do I need to prioritize. You need to think about effort estimation and what skills inventory you have in terms of resources you're working with. You will do gap analysis, feature function gap analysis. You will think about technical debt. You're thinking about security debt. You're thinking about release planning. And end of the day, here you will have committed roadmap and you will essentially do the delivery, right? So here your analysis and technical skills can become, very important. Last but not least, also very important is stakeholder management. Here you're working like a project manager in a way. You're doing, laying out your product, the release planning and running the scrums sometimes, by getting the buy-in, selling the vision, conflict resolution, urgent issues prioritization, and alignment. And this urgent issue prioritization typically happens in many companies every day. So very hard to sort of maintain a focus because something just keeps popping up. So a product manager role is not easy, right? It is a hard role, and as you can see, there is a lot that goes into this role. I have put together here 4 buckets, and the 4 buckets, to simplify, is vision, strategy, and research, design, execution, and stakeholder management. This is, and we are driven by our core mission. So as I think about it, you're going for an interview, you understand all of this piece. What I want to do is I want to really very quickly look at the job description for one of the companies, as I mentioned, Calendly, and we'll look at, what exactly they are looking for. So um, and I'm probably running a little fast, and the reason is because I know some of this, it'll be, some of this work, if you do it in like a 2 or 3 hour workshop, it makes it much easier. But let's run through this with Calendly. So, this is from LinkedIn. I would not worry about the job. Why join Calendly's product team? And all of this is good. But I want to focus here are some of the things that they have highlighted, right? So one of the things they have, there's a question, is this a mural or a Miro board? This is shared. This is Lucid Spark, very, very similar to Miro board. So very, very similar that way. What are some of the high impact opportunities you will tackle? So let's think about it. They're saying drive Calendly's growth by defining vision, strategy, and roadmap as a part of our expansion into enterprises. This piece here, expansion into enterprises, if you think about it, is the core mission, I think. And I've read this. You have to read it 2, 3 times, then you can start to actually glean this. So expansion into enterprises is what they're asking us. Develop the product roadmap and set clear goals for the team. Okay, efficiently execute to ship products and deliver impact for our business and users. Okay, we are going to take all of this, we'll bucketize in it in a moment, join forces with designers, researchers, and data scientists to explore problem space and define feature functionality. Makes sense. Collaborate cross-functionally with leadership, go-to-market teams, and the key stakeholders within the company. Drive user research and analyze metrics that inform product success and health. Staying up to date on the many ways our customers use Calendly to get their jobs done. So this is what they're looking for, right? At a core, we'll come and we'll move things around in a moment. And then this opportunity is for you if you have 3+ years of experience in product management. Awesome. We're going to actually talk about it when we say, tell me about yourself. Previous experience building and monetizing modern B2B SaaS products. Amazing. We will leverage that. Shipped sizable software products and are used to working through entire product lifecycle under deadline pressure, keen product sense, user experience design, experience with deep empathy for customers, highly motivated to remove the pain and power of frictionless experience for customers, strong working knowledge and various needs across stakeholders, that is business users, so on and so forth. So this is good. This job description, even though short, gives us so much information that now we are pretty ready. If we reorganize it, we should be really in a position we can be, we can be really ready for our next interview. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I want to reorganize some of this work. I want to bucketize this work along these pieces: the core mission, vision, strategy, and research, design, execution, and stakeholder management. So let's go here. I'm going to bucketize all of these things. So everything up here, I marked this mission, expansion to enterprises is seems to be the mission. I'll validate during the interview. Is with this role, are you thinking about, is the core mission going to be expansion into enterprises? Is this what you're aiming to do? Has there any work that has been done already along the way, right? So I'll ask that question. But drive Calendly's growth by defining the vision, strategy, and roadmap falls into vision, strategy, and research. Develop the product roadmap and set clear goals for the team. I'll put that. Some of these are a little blurry. You could put it, up here or somewhere else, but I will put it in here. Efficiently execute to ship products and deliver impact for our business users. I'll put it in execution. Join forces with designers and researchers and data scientists to explore problem space and define feature functionality. I'll put it in design. And then drive user research, collaborate cross-functionally with leadership, go-to-market, and other key stakeholders. I'll put it in stakeholder management. Drive user research. I'll put it in this. Staying up to date with many other way, on the many ways our customers use Calendly to get their job done. I'll put it in this. So now what we have done is we have organized this information. We understand what are the things which fall where. And then over here, there are a couple of things that caught my eye. Previous experience building and monetizing modern B2B SaaS products. So I'm going to use this. And again, it's possible you may ask a question, look, what happens when I don't have experience? That is okay. We're going to find something which is in parallel. So you can substitute that. What we cannot do is, if there is something that the customer they are looking for, we can't go in to a job interview hoping that question doesn't get asked. Actually, what we can do is, if there is a question that is where we feel we are a little short, we're going to prepare for it. So we can actually, sometimes I prefer to actually even start sometimes with this, right? So ship sizable software products and are used to working through entire product cycle under deadline pressure. Good, I'm going to use this. Keen product sense, and this part, I'm going to use this as well. This was part of their opportunity. So now what I want to do is, we looked at this piece here. This was the original job description, right? I started to color this job description based on these buckets. So I've got these buckets, and I highlighted some of these things which I'm going to leverage into the question, tell me about yourself. And why do I want to do this? The reason I want to do this, because I'm going to frame about my question about tell me about yourself momentarily. The reason for that is that when we come to this piece, I'm going to bring you to the visual canvas real quickly here. Uh, when we think about our, give me a second, sorry, share screen. Okay, so thank you for your patience with me. So the reason I wanted to actually do this is when we think about the core functions, that's the answer. When we populate this in a certain way, that is the answer we're going to give about tell me about yourself. And we're going to give the answer tell me about yourself in a way which actually leads the interview a certain path that you are really prepared for. We want to be in a place where we don't want to come into the place where we are at the receiving end. We want to be in a place where we actually are driving the conversation. So tell me about yourself. We're going to use this recent accomplishment, this bucket about things you're proud of. That's a question you may get asked. Reasons and value proposition when we get to the value on the visual canvas. This is essentially a question people are asking. Why should we hire you? When we talk about the piece about stories, this is where people are asking the question about tell me about a time when you did this, about the believability. And STAR is just a framework around creating narratives. And then stakeholders when we do this, which why should I personally support your candidacy and opportunities and challenges? What questions do you have for me? So now what I want to do is I wanted to show that to you that in the visual canvas, as we saw that we have done two separate things. We looked at the job description, we have bucketized some things. We're going to take what we bucketize, we're going to populate that on visual canvas. And the reason we are doing that is because as we populate our visual canvas, we're going to be prepared for all of these questions, which are some of the most prominent questions. Either they are asked or are in the back of the person who is actually interviewing you. So let me go ahead and come back to my Lucid Spark board here. Uh, all right, so with that, let's come to this reframing of some of this work. So we took the job description, we put it into bucket, and now I'm going to reframe. So here is our visual canvas. I want to just show you. It is fully populated, but we're going to work through one of these buckets here today, and the other ones we can set up a follow up. If that might be appealing to you, so we could do something like that. So our mission in the visual canvas, the first function we said was a core function, and we are answering the question, tell me about yourself. So what I did was I started what they were looking for here in this piece, previous experience, 3+ experience working in product management, and previous experience building and monetizing modern B2B SaaS products. So the interviewer asks you a question, Gaurav, tell me about yourself. So I'll start something here. One way to do it is where you say, let me tell about me about you. Let me tell you about all my experiences. I worked for company A and B. When I was at A, I did this. When I was at B, I did this. When I was at C, I did this. It's all on your resume. So it doesn't add a lot of value. But on the other hand, if they ask me something like this here, what I will do is I'll say the last 5 years of my experience are all with the SaaS companies. I have delivered large and hugely impactful software products many times in a time crunch, right? These are both of the things that are relevant for them. And I would say after this is, as I provide some of these details to you, I'm very happy for us to double click and tell you how I have done some of this work. Now, as I think about it, the way I go about product management and about my work, because I've spent a lot of time in project management, the first fundamental thing that I do is aligned with the core mission. And I do that by working with executives and other team members to identify the problem and solution space. And some examples of some of the work that I've done is, I spearheaded a product where we created a $5 million contribution to the business top line by entering into an adjacent segment. So I did that. From another piece where I believe I created a massive impact is we launched a feature set that reduced the sales friction and allowed us to expand our enterprise business by 50%. Both of these topics, based on what I have seen in the job description, are top of mind for them. And I'm providing these because I want them to ask me the question, how did you do that? And I'll prepare that. I want them to, I want to come to a place where we're looking at a problem and say, this is how we're going to do this, right? And then, I'll say, that, so this is what I've done recently. But as I think about product management, I think about three things, as a product management process that essentially I work with, vision, strategy, and research. I will look at the design process and I work on the execution and delivery as a product manager. The outcome of the work that I'll do in vision, strategy, and research is to make sure we have a crystallized planning, sketched roadmap, and a set of clear goals for the team. Again, we can double click on any of these things, how I do it from a design process, but essentially I'm a huge believer in doing work in an agile and a rapid prototyping. So come in, think about, conceptualize, and deliver some rapid prototypes. And along the way, you have to think about how we're going to measure success and all of that, and execution and delivery. That's the last bucket on a product management standpoint. And from an outcome perspective, there are things like release planning, there are things like shipping and accomplishing desired outcomes. That's something that we do. So if someone asks me the question about tell me about yourself, I will start here. This is something, this seems like they have already highlighted in the job description that, in the last 5 years, I have done this validation of what they're looking for. I have delivered hugely impactful software products many times in a time crunch, validation of what they were looking for, aligned with the core mission. Again, this is with the mission that they have, that seems that we have sort of, it's our hypothesis that the mission they are looking for. So we'll start there and I'll say, are there other core missions that we can work on? Then I'll talk very quickly about our process, how I go about doing it. And I will wrap up the tell me about yourself by saying that, look, I mean, this is my process, but from a results and accomplishment perspective, there are a few things I would like to share. And what I would like to share is that I have shipped a very complex product in my current role, where in 30 days, uh, while reducing the security debt. It was a hugely complex project, and I'm happy to also share some details how I approached it. I have a strong sense of customer experience. I truly believe in delivering delightful customer experiences. And one of the other things I'm really proud of is I did a workflow streamlining project that we collectively saved, excuse me, 10,000 customer hours per month. 10,000 customer hours per month. And I've been called a slayer of dreaded dragons that cause customer pain. So that's about myself. We can, from here, we can pivot and go wherever you would like us to go, and we can talk about any of the things that's most interesting. Now, let me ask you a question. Based on what I've just discussed, are there things or areas which are of specific interest to you where we should go and do a deeper dive? And also, from your mission perspective for this role, what are we trying to accomplish? And this is now where we have created that sort of a dialogue there. Um, Aaron asks, is this vision board going to be shared? So yes, happy to do it. It's not a problem. So I want to pause here, and because I know we are quite close to the time. We have about 7 minutes left. There are other pieces here, which is about how do you go about stakeholders, opportunities and challenges, and there are questions about results, your value proposition, your superpowers, stories. How do you go about telling the stories? One thing I would say is when you build this board, it'll take you a good hour and a half, to build this. Once you have done this, you're going to be in a place where you can really come back and you can come back and you will have a frame by which you can answer these questions. But one piece I wanted to say here is that this connects with this connects with this connects with this. You need to have interconnection. There is this lock chain that you need to have in order to make sure that everything sort of streams, flows for, it flows in a smooth way. If we would want, we can actually do some session where we just work on this, because part of it is just explaining and then doing it. I'm happy to do it. So uh, let me pause and see if there are questions that anyone would like to ask.
So I see some questions actually posted on chat.
Indeed, is the recording going to be shared to, I think, Hillary, I'll direct that to you.
Yes, so I'm posting it in the chat right now, but it'll be posted to our YouTube channel, which I'll provide a link to, and then also our BPM website within a few days of the event.
Okay, and I think Mo says that would love to have a session where we can work on this roadmap. Definitely, I'm happy to do that. Okay, any other questions as it relates to this specific job description, or if anyone would like to share the experiences with the recent interviews?
So I think Hugh is asking, raising hand. Hugh, you can ask questions. Okay.
Okay, that's okay. So I can continue with the content if it makes sense.
Yeah.
There are Uh, you're welcome. This was a great exercise. Thank you for mapping this out. Would love to be able to touch briefly on how to answer if you don't have certain requirements, specifically in this example, the 3 years experience. Okay, that's a great question. Natalie asked, what do you do when you don't have 3 years of experience, right? So I'll tell you a couple of things that are from my personal experience, and I will say one thing that we have to think about. Uh, it is not advisable to go in and try to make things up, but at the same time, we can always go in and demonstrate things that you can actually do. So a couple of years ago, I had a lady. She when we were hiring for the person, we were looking for someone who has a very deep domain experience, and someone who has done customer success for a while and all of that. And she had not done that, for example. Um, but we still hired her because when the time came for her narrative, the narrative was so compelling. She had started her business. She had actually struggled quite a bit from from her life story perspective. We could see the grit that she had, and we could see that the way she had progressed, despite of all the circumstances, that me and my boss, we talked about it. Say, look, I mean, we got to, we got to make a change here, and I think she'll do just fine. And she did wonderfully well because she was determined, and she was persistent, and she was relentless in her pursuit. So with some coaching and guidance, she was able to get to a level where she did really well. So um, I would say, when it comes to the place where you are thinking about, I don't have that experience, think about, can you map it to something that actually manages that? So I may not have 3 years product experience as such, right? You could go in and say, look, when I think about the product management process as such, I never held a formal title of a product manager. But what I have actually done is, as I think about a product release process, because I've worked very closely with some of these people, in this bucket, this is the experience that I have done. In this bucket, I have this experience. I have in this bucket, I have done this, all of this, and I put together all of this in this very nice sort of a framework, a document that I'll share with you at the end of the day. And I would love to collaborate with you as I refine and expand on that. So something like that, because you're being open, but at the same time you're sort of showing the experience you have there in those buckets, something which is sort of hopefully makes it a little bit more visceral. Um, Now, there's a question for relatively smaller company. Hopefully, I answered the question. If it feels like it is not very clear, please go ahead and ask any follow-up. I'm happy to take that. For relatively smaller companies or other companies with relatively unstructured interviews, I could see this working perfectly since you get to drive interview with this mapping. How would this change if it's a larger company with more structured interviews where they make sure to ask all candidates same question? That's actually a phenomenal question. So when you go to companies such as, for example, you go to AWS, they have a very defined process, right? Or you go to Google, for example, they have a very defined process, and there is a certain rubric that people are supposed to follow, and they're supposed to go through some of those things, right? So, for example, when you go to AWS, they have these 16 leadership principles. You need to make sure that as you frame some of your answers, those answers are framed in terms of those leadership principles. When you go to Google for an interview, they really place a lot of focus on sometimes sort of, I would say, design puzzle kind of questions. So it becomes important to understand what you're going to actually do and which company expects what. But this framework is still very, very relevant. And I say that because most interviews, whether they ask this question or not, they will have some form of tell me about yourself. They will ask some question like that. They may ask something, they may or may not ask you things you're proud of, but it is up to us to show things that we have done really, really well. And despite the fact they have a rubric, what you have is when you put some of these things together, it essentially allows you to showcase your best selves to them. And as you answer this, this is what I've done. This is such an amazing thing. Now they start mapping things that they think you will come into the project and you'll do. In case of, for example, you to go to Google, it becomes a little bit, sometimes it could be they're hiring you for a role, but they don't know, they may not have a specific mission assigned to you yet. So understanding that there may not be a specific mission that is assigned to you yet is good, because you would say, what are the kind of things I have delivered? You can go in and you can actually talk about them. So they can actually map and say, this person would be a good fit. We don't have a mission right now. We are hiring, We will come in because in many cases, in some of the tech companies, you may come in and you may be asked to say, come in, build the strategy. It's a bottoms up sort of product management. If you go to, for example, Apple, it changes and it's not bottom up, it's top down, where the leadership tells, I want you to execute. So understanding which kind of employer you're going to do, you may have to adjust the strategy, but I think populated in this canvas is sort of a common denominator. For example, the questions you're going to frame here, whether in every interview they're going to add at the end or during the interview, they will say, what questions you have for me. This is how you go up about, and you can ask questions. How does product and organization today ensure that you're hitting the bullseye in one go, right? So your results and value proposition, stories and narratives. So once you do it, I completely agree that you need to understand where you're going and then sort of adjust your posture based on that. That was a great question, by the way. All right, will the Canvas process change if we are moving from non-tech PM role to tech PMs, outbound or growth PM role, etc.? So this is also a phenomenal question. There is a raging debate, and debates depends on company to company, right? To the extent you want to hire PMs who are anthropologists, where you come in and you think about things such as what is the user experience and things like that, or you hire the PMs who are, for example, in the past have been developers and they have subject matter expertise, so they are SMEs in the field. So where do you go with this? Um, I don't think there is a sort of a right or wrong answer. The many companies have a certain very strong given point of view. So, for example, if you're going for a company such as Google, and if you don't have any technical experience, it's going to be really, really hard. It's unless you have something really spectacular on your resume, you may not even get called, right? So that's one thing. On the other hand, in some of the other companies, they don't care as much about the technical piece of it, right? So uh, you go, what the way to do this is you inventory your skills and understand there is the universe of companies, and some companies are looking for people who are more process, workflow, customer experience, and there are companies who are looking for all of that, but at the same time they're also more technical. So unless you're in the path where you want to say, look, I'm going to go to and become more technical, do certifications, which I think is a hard path, I will go and fish in the place where the fish is, the relevant fish for us, right? So knowing that in Google, if you're going to Google, the non-tech part may not work, I would not worry too much about it. But then, it might actually work, for example, in AWS. In AWS, many times they will hire people who are not as technical as you might expect at Google. So I will adjust my target companies I go towards. With that brings me to one other question, which is something that just hit my mind, which is when you think about applying for the companies, do you do a shotgun approach in a sense where you just spray and pray? Where do I get anyone who's going to really answer to my questions? I'll work through it. Or do you go and you become very focused, sort of sniper approach, where it's like, I need to hit this target. um, I generally feel that having a targeted approach for 5, 6, 7, 8 companies, is a much better than applying for 100 companies, because it helps you preserve. Of course, sometimes applying for a job is just easy. You go in and you boom, click, 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 3 clicks, it's done. You could definitely do that, and that's okay. But as you think about interview preparation, if you try to prepare for 100 companies, becomes super, super hard. What you have to do is you have to say, these companies would be a great target for me, and then you apply, and you apply, and then you prepare for those interviews as you get calls from them, and then as you go about it, you create collaterals. And one of the things, when you have a sort of a targeted approach, as you build some of this piece and your stories and narratives, you can reuse them. You don't have to go and restructure all your pitch, right? So the first time you build this, it is probably going to take you like an hour and a half, maybe more. But once you have done this, and if you're applying for a similar company, the next company, if you're talking to the second one, it becomes easier, because some of these things, you'll move around some things based on what you see, but it'll be it'll become a little bit easier. So I hope, Sai, I answered your question. The short piece is, you fish where you have a chance of success. um, if you try and do in places where it becomes super hard, if you're a non-tech PM trying to do a PM in a company which looks for technical people. Excellent. Any other questions?
I think we have 6 more minutes, guys, before we end the session. Excellent questions. Please continue with those. So we have a few more minutes to go.
and if not, I'll use the time to actually talk about something, um, the questions, right? So we talked about these two pieces up until now. We talked about the core functions, we talked about recent accomplishments and things like that. Let's very quickly talk about opportunities and challenges. The stakeholders, we discussed about this. Let's talk about opportunities and questions. What questions do you have for me? So I have framed some questions. And the way I have framed these questions are, for example, if I'm going for this interview at Calendly, which, by the way, you might want to do, it is posted like couple of weeks or a couple of days ago. I think it's very recent posting on LinkedIn. How does the product organization today ensure hitting the bullseye in one go, right? So the way you would ask this question is, look, for me, it is really important as I think about my deliverables to hit the bullseye in one go. And I've done that, as I've mentioned, through my process and through sort of rigorous collaboration with some of the team members and rigorous, respectful collaboration with the team members. I am wondering, based on where you stand today, how does your organization, how does the product team is ensuring that you're hitting the bullseye in one go? And now the tables have turned a little bit, and now let them talk. And as they talk, you write down what they're saying, and they will, they'll reveal what they're thinking and how they go about it and what's their worldview, things like that. Um, I would also ask a question because here, as I was looking at this job description, it was the mission was expansion into enterprises. Again, this is conjecture in a sense, but if I think about it, I would say, how does the product team today supports? How is the product team supporting the engine of growth, right? So how do you do that? Are you looking for adjacent markets? Are you looking for upsells, and how does the team support that? So that could be another question you ask, and then this is a sort of a very open-ended question, and now they will go and they will talk about what they're doing, and as they're doing it, please write it down, because every interview and every discussion you have gives you an opportunity to take that information and apply that what you have learned. So you talk to person number one, use that information. So for the next discussion, leverage that information to now improve your answers and things like that. So you could say another question here is, I shine in high entropy environments. And how does the team resolve competing priorities? That's a question, by the way, they ask you. And if they don't, then you ask them that question. Uh, so okay, there is a question he is asking. If in your earlier example, on sitting across the table from the interviewer, can you just get up and move closer if they sent you into a room first before they came in and choose another seat at the other end of the end of a long table? I would not choose a seat which is at the other end of the long table. I would try to sit next to the interview where it is possible and they feel comfortable. The other piece I would say is when people ask the question, um, a lot of times what you see is some question is asked and people move back, right? So they are just kind of taken aback. When people ask the question, one thing you can do is, even if you have a more distance, I would lean in and I would look up and then I will answer the question, which is, and through the body language, I'll keep my hands open. It's like you embrace the question. It's like, thank you, that's an amazing question. Let's dive into it. So I will lean in, and it's like, this was such an interesting question. Let's now dive into it. But sitting across the table, which is sort of a long table on the other ends, um, sometimes you just that's the setup. You can't do it because the interviewer wants you to do it. But sort of being in a place, having your own respectful space, but at the same time where you can collaborate is actually much better than sort of a ping pong across the table. Great question. Thank you. Okay, I think we're just about at time. Any other questions that are top of mind for anyone? Okay, sorry, I am. Barikas says the text is very small. I'm sorry, I should have made it a little bit bigger. Uh, we'll share the visual canvas, and you'll be able to pinch up and make it bigger for sure. Thank you for pointing that out.
Perfect. I think we are almost towards the end, guys. So if it's possible, so we do have a survey that we ask everyone to fill out. So I posted it in the chat, and I can redo it here. Please do complete it. It definitely help us improve on these events. And before we end, actually, I want to thank Gaurav taking time. I know he's in West Coast, so it's a little. I know 9 o'clock is not early, but still, thank you for taking time and being here. So, and some of you asked, like, can you reach out to Gaurav? Yes, please free to reach out to Gaurav. I think you're more than welcome. He is an excellent professional. I'm sure you will benefit a lot from what he has to offer. One maybe last question from anyone, and before we end, and or Hillary, you have something else to add, and we will then end.
No, I think it's great from my perspective, Gaurav. Thank you so much for your time and for talking to us about this. I know it's on a lot of people's minds. So it looks like Ivan or Ivan might have a question.
Definitely, please go ahead. I would go ahead.
I don't know, Evan, if you're on mute, if you're talking.
And if not, feel free to, or if it was by mistake, no worries.
Okay, can you hear
Oh, there
me?
we go. Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Very simple. Blockchain company is very different, very different recruitment based on my experience since 2009. A lot of people are being losing their jobs due to the Bitcoin going down. As Bitcoin goes down, everything goes down, quality jobs, etc. Question is, if you're recruited, pass the interviews, you're selected, and they rescind, meaning that they back off or they don't finalize your recruitment at the end of the day. Any suggestions on that? Just to be cool with the company, but just keep on moving to the next one.
Look, I think we are in this a time where it is the companies rescinding offer is becoming sort of very common. And I'm just taking a slight sidetrack here. So, there was a question about connecting with me or reaching out to me. Here's my contact information on the LinkedIn as well as my email, direct email. And Ivan, so the one thing I would say is, as we think about companies rescinding the offers, they are many times they're doing it because the economic condition is such where they, instead of doing the layoffs, they are essentially trying to say, look, we can't do this. So there are two pieces to think about it today. Before the session, we were just talking about, I've seen some candidates who are like, I want to see what's going on, and some candidates are becoming a little hesitant to change because they don't want to go to a place where they find that the company rescinds the offer or they'll be laid off. So in a certain sense, if you think about it, is actually, if you have not given the notice to your current employer, rescinding an offer is actually a good thing because you didn't end up in a place where after a month now they actually went ahead and did the layoff, and that is a terrible situation because now you have you have to deal with this because they just didn't have whatever the challenge was, right? But there is an opportunity here. The opportunity here is, even if they rescind the offer, be gracious, in a very gracious way, and remain in touch with them. So I would move on to the next opportunity, but at the same time, will remain in touch with them. And one thing is, out of sight, out of mind. So if you're out of sight, people will forget about you. They feel bad when someone rescinds the offer, but at the same time, if you're not touching you're not you're out of sight, they'll forget about you after a day, pretty much. So what I would do is, I will create a path. It's like, okay, I understand it is a bit, it's unfortunate, but what I want to do here is this. Every couple of weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, I will share something that is of value with them. End of the day, you want to show to this company that the return on investment, because they're going to hire you, the return of investment is much higher than the investment they're going to do. So if you can show that, then it becomes a no-brainer. So you want it to make no-brainer, and the way to do it is by creating values in your interaction. So, after a while, I'll go back and I will say, look, I was just working on this or came across this article, which I found fascinating. And it's not about just our comparing an article. You add your thinking to it. And as I was synthesizing some of this, some of these things keep coming at me, and some of this work I have done. And keep a short, simple email to them. And that way you're top of mind. They see that you're adding value. And as things change, this climate would not remain forever. As things will change, you will have an opportunity potentially to go back. But I would also move on at the same time. You can't get stuck at the same place. So the other thing, Ivan, you brought up is very important. When you go to we generally talked about software companies which is high velocity and things like that. When you think about hardware companies or manufacturing, they may not be so lean, or in that sense they can't there is a long product planning cycles. If you're going to deliver a hardware product, like you're going to get a new Alexa, it's not going to happen over a 2-week sprint, right? This is going to take a long time. So, and the choices you make have a long downstream impact. So product managers, it is important to understand that as you're going through it, that the nature of your, depending on what sector the business is, the nature of product management changes a little bit as well. Ivan, great question. I hope it may, what I said makes some sense for you.
All right. No, excellent. I love it. I think everybody stayed. Now people are dropping off, which is a good sign after we have gone through over 60 minutes. So thank you everyone for being here, and very important topic. And then I want to thank our speaker again, Gaurav, and thank you, Hillary, for organizing everything. Before, as we end, please, as Gaurav offered, you may reach out to us, and some of the contents will be published on BPMA side. So you will see that coming in few days or few weeks. So please be patient. And Gaurav, when you have a moment, please share the board and the canvas and everything that you have shared. And excellent, excellent. Even I picked on few things, Gaurav. So thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
everyone.
much.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Raj.
much. It was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I wish you all a brilliant day and a great weekend. Bye,
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
guys.
you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, bye.